Hello, I'm Dr. John with the Voyage Clinics podcast, and today we have a fun guest, Tyler Hacking. He's a friend of mine. We're both fellow mushroom guys and super nerdy, and so I like nerds. And my wife was on a podcast with me a little while ago. She's probably nerdier than both of us, but this is really fun to have you, Tyler. Thanks for coming today.
I really appreciate you having me today. Thanks so much, Dr. Sanders.
Hey, man, tell us a little bit about your life and your life's journey, and tell us a little bit about, our mission here at Voyage Clinics podcast is just to help communities and families learn and grow, and in the healthcare space, yes, but also in life and mental, and there's so many spaces that have trickle over. So I know we're both kind of mushroom nerds, and we're kind of like nature nerds, I would call us maybe, but you more than me. And so I wanted to bring you on and kind of tap into some of that. But tell us a little bit about your background, maybe your professional background, your educational background, but then also your journey.
Okay. I was born in Salt Lake City. I grew up in Utah, and I've lived in many of the surrounding states, started businesses in the surrounding states, and tested out different industries. So when I grew up here in Utah, it was actually greener than it currently is. I remember that we had a lot more trees, and it didn't seem to be as hot. Like, we actually had way more snow as well. Now that I'm older, it's almost like you can see the desertification of Utah. And even though it was already classified as a desert, it wasn't so bad. And now it's really crispy. It feels like, anyways. And so, I don't know, I lived in multiple desert states, and I grew up working on different farms in California, Colorado, and Washington, Oregon. And I learned a lot of different techniques and how to grow different types of crops, and also how to not grow different types of crops. Learning from your failures is very important. What I also learned is that there is a limit to how much I could teach myself. And so I went back to school, came back to Utah. After Colorado's legalization, I lived there and consulted for farmers who were growing cannabis because they were all new. And it was a very interesting atmosphere. There were a lot of really big cannabis farmers, medical cannabis, who didn't use cannabis, which is very interesting. It was just a money crop to them, right? But it was huge there, very different from Utah. I moved back to Utah as they were legalizing, not because of that, but to go back to school.
Yeah.
And I started a degree in botany, and I worked as a chef and a photographer and a research science student. And I did that for about 6 years, finished my biology degree and my botany degree, and with enough research experience to qualify to skip master's and just start straight PhD in natural sciences, which I'm really excited about. Not in a rush, though. You should really take your time, because it's like getting married. You're going to spend 5 years with an individual. So, pick the right person and program and university and everything. You got to really shop around for PhDs.
And that's where you're at now.
It's one of the things that I'm doing right now. I'm PhD shopping.
Cool.
And
what would that be in?
That's a great question. So I really love environmental chemistry, biogeochemistry, things like that, with a huge agriculture focus. I like to understand all of the levels of it. So, my degree is in botany, but understanding soil geochemistry and atmospheric and water chemistry are crucial to understanding just plants, right? Mm-hmm. And we're here today to talk about fungi. My specialization, what I did for my research thesis that I defended when I graduated from my bachelor's is, which was formally matriculated, so I had to defend it kind of like a PhD.
Oh, cool.
It was focused on the ecological interactions between Morel mushrooms and certain trees at different stages, whether that tree was alive or not. Sometimes it was almost, fully decayed material that we found them in. But essentially, they're not present without the tree. And so there's a huge statistically significant ecological interaction. And that's how I started finding mushrooms, not by looking for mushrooms, but by looking for specific trees, or more specifically, parameter combinations in a habitat. Mm-hmm. Certain amounts of moisture and humidity, combinations of trees, other environmental parameters like the time of year, how recently it rained, how dry it's been that year. There's a whole bunch of variables that go into finding individual mushroom species.
Totally.
And I found that really fun, and it was also a very great way to learn how to be a good scientist because it exposes you to a variety of different types of sciences. And it forces you to spend time in the lab and do analysis, which is also really fun. So for PhD, to answer your question, it's sort of weird I didn't become a physicist or a chemist because that's really what my passion is. I studied plants because they're light eaters, and it's not fully understood. How do you take 11 photons and turn it into glucose? It's partially understood, but not fully. Mm-hmm. And there are quantum mechanical components that are just, complete mystery to us in biology. And I find that fascinating. It's very interesting, I think. Yeah. Studying plants, it got me into fungi. So I started focusing a lot of my research on mycology. And most of my publications that we're currently working on getting published are focused in mycology. My first one is on addiction. I'd love to chat with you about that. Yeah. And I'm going to swap it up. I'm going to definitely go with somewhere in the realm of thermodynamics or physical chemistry for my PhD. Maybe something like biogeochemistry or biochemistry. I have a couple of specific foci that I would like to conduct research in. And
not many people do what you've done, which is come from interest space or work space into education. Often people come from education into the work and interest space. And to make that circle, I think, and even now you're continuing to circle and you're continuing to find even deeper spaces to hone in on knowledge. And I think that's a powerful journey. That's a really cool.
Science isn't something you finish. You know, it's an unending journey that leads you from one fascinating, fulfilling discovery to the next. Yeah. And I think that each of those discoveries enhance the resolution and beauty of the universe that we see. It allows you to see the universe more clearly. It makes it more beautiful.
It's cool. We did a podcast on right brain, left brain, and its applications in medicine and in healthcare and caring for people. And I think the same application is here. There's elements in nature, and when I go into nature, I am very much not left brain centric. I am very much art, breathe, meditate, grounding. I mean, I got my clothes on, but I'm out there getting into it.
So you could turn off left brain, huh? And I feel like I can't. Like I'm stuck with both all the time. Yeah, and I can't turn one or the other off unless I just go to sleep.
And it's healthy and it's good to have both. But that's so beautiful to see both at work in your mind.
I really appreciate that. It's hard to quantify nature. Mm-hmm. It's hard to articulate the quantification of nature and the things that are statistically significant, but I find it to be so fun. This is a bunch of different morel mushrooms that we documented photographically over the last couple of years. Some of them are dehydrated with a black background, and I just cut them together. And it's interesting because we have a lot of biodiversity just within one genus, right? Yeah. And these mushrooms are very coveted in Utah because they taste like steak. They're amazing, super beefy, very umami. I've had vegans say that it's the best thing that they can eat in the whole world, you know? And they preserve very well. I should have brought some today.
I have a whole bunch too.
Yeah, I bet you do. Yeah. You go out with Blaine, huh?
I go out alone a lot and Blaine sometimes.
Nice. Yeah, I've seen some videos with
These
you guys.
These are super cool.
Thank you.
Can you tell us a little bit about what your outcomes were here? You were researching like soil comps and which trees kind of related to which areas, and these are all different types of Morellas, correct?
Right. Some of them may be the same species. We're still confirming with molecular genetic analysis, and we likely have about 6 or 7 species in this image. And a couple of them are actually just phenotypes or morphotypes or ecotypes of that same species, right? Okay. But with Morels, we possibly have 12 to 15 species here in Utah, which is really interesting.
Super cool.
So multiple blondes, multiple blacks, what people call black Morels is actually multiple different species. And some of them are very, very difficult to differentiate. Perfect time to talk about this. One of my professors wrote this book. You can buy it on Amazon. It's one of my very favorite books in my entire collection. And the reason is because it has essentially a comprehensive list of all plant anatomy. And you use that with dichotomous keys to identify species of organisms. And without this, it's very, very difficult to say what species is that, right? Because the morphology of fungi, it has a lot of overlap. And so taxonomy and identification, it's not as accurate as it is with plants in a lot of cases. And so you, for example, would have to look at some of these under a microscope and their spore structures and things like that in order to actually say what species it is. And even then, there may be multiple species where they're identical all the way down to cellular anatomy. So molecular genetic analysis is really the only way to actually differentiate species in the fungal kingdom.
Can we read the name of this book?
Oh, yeah. Absolutely.
So
this is from one of my very favorite professors.
Plant Identification Terminology.
Yes, from Dr. Harris. And his wife illustrated everything.
No way.
Which is amazing. And so it's highly specific anatomy, terminology, and I found this very useful. I'm sure you had to do this stuff for human anatomy.
Yep.
Plant anatomy was hardcore because we had to learn the anatomy of completely different genera in different families, all the way down, not just macro, but micro. So cell and tissue anatomy terminology. Organelles. It is nuts.
That's really cool.
Most people took that class twice.
Yeah, I bet. That sounds really cool. Super nerdy. Again, super nerdy. What was the position that you were defending about the Morchella species?
That essentially the statistical associations ecologically, which we quantify in different ways, the most statistically significant ones aren't with direct one-to-one plant associations, that essentially there are multiple parameters. We argued that the soil geochemistry and physical chemical structure of the soil was one of the most significant components because soil seemed to be pretty consistent across most sites, whereas tree type wasn't. Weather wasn't. Proximity to water wasn't. And what we tried to do, and the reason we had so many projects, is we just collected every type of parameter that we could think of. We got all of the analytical equipment we possibly could. We did soil analysis, GIS, hydrological analysis. That's still in progress. We're finishing our molecular genetic analysis so we can say, okay, we're not just talking about morels because that's super vague. You're talking about a genus with lots of species that are unidentified. And so without the molecular genetic analysis, you really can't quantify much, right?
Wow.
Which black morel are you talking about?
Right.
You know, so luckily I met Alan Rockefeller. He's a wonderful mycologist, probably at this point the most famous in the world. And this year, I'm sure he set an unbeatable record at presenting probably over 40 mushroom festivals around the world. I'm super stoked. I'll see him in Georgia next. But Alan is really great with DNA. And this is a learning process for all of us, right? So our first batch actually failed because we freeze-dried everything. And we didn't know this, but it actually destroys the DNA in this genus.
Oh, it really?
Yeah, but it works for other fungi. And so I sent Alan all of these freeze-dried morels, all these beautiful different species, and we couldn't get anything from them. Yeah. And so we're sending out a lot more this year, lots of different sites. And it's interesting, the project that I started, Mysteries of the Morchella, we've involved citizen scientists, and I've been able to train dozens of them. We use iNaturalist and other forms of tracking, whether it's notes or different analytical software. We collect a ton of parameters, and then we do statistical analysis, and that determines what's statistically significant. So that's what we focus on in later trials, right? Yeah. And so this is our 5th year. Now I can actually quantify things a bit more clearly and specifically. So we find morel mushrooms on northeast facing slopes predominantly, north to east. You're going to find them, if you're lucky, at the very end of March. This is in Utah. All the way into sometimes July and August. People get a lot in wood chips in their gardens in Utah as well. And if you use iNaturalist, the app, create an account and start searching, there are enough publicly listed locations now that you can go out to where they are. You can look at the month of the year when that happened and try that time and place every year. I host a lot of hikes. So we're doing some pretty awesome ones over the next month. We have the is it okay if we talk about the events?
Of course.
Okay, so we have the Mushroom Society of Utah's annual Fall Foray in Camas, Utah. It's amazing. The membership for that society is only $25 a year. It's the only one I'm a member of. And it's because they're very active, they're very positive, they're very, very educational. And because of that, I just love everything that they do. For that $25 a year fee, you get a T-shirt, lots of content, usually multiple shirts and bandanas, and so many events. You can't possibly do them all. Mm-hmm. And they also participate in the other event I want to mention, the Utah Fungi Festival. Right, they're huge supporters and enablers for the Utah Fungi Festival. We're doing the second one this year. I'm so stoked. Yeah. So I have some of that information. And I'm just going to read it so that you guys can look it up, if that's okay.
We'll put the link also in the comments.
Thanks.
But
okay.
Go ahead and read some stuff. That's fine too.
So the Fall Foray is this weekend. It's August 23rd to 25th. Just go to utahmushrooms.org and register as a member. Completely worth it. I highly recommend it. The only public society I'm a member of. And then, let's see, the Utah Fungi Festival. This is the second annual one. It starts on September 6th and goes through September 8th. We're doing a ton of different events, different locations. We have lots of speakers, including myself and Alan Rockefeller and a ton of others. Please check it out. It's a wonderful event. Mostly it's local businesses as well that participate and our vendors. And so I highly recommend it. Last time was a total blast. And to look that up, you can find these also, by the way, on Facebook and on Instagram, but you can look them up on Google. The tickets for that are at wholesunwellness.com/ just go there and you'll see the Utah Fungi Fest. Yeah, I don't want to do rest. Okay, thanks for letting me plug those in.
No,
I'm big supporters of them because I really love them. And the community itself is actually really, I don't know, super positive compared to a lot of the other ones I've been a part of. And I really like that they're highly communal. There's kids all over the place, but then there's also, you know, people discussing all sorts of interesting topics, whether they're scientific or medical and environmental. And all right.
That's really cool, Tyler. So one of the things we talked about recently was just the powers of community, and wherever there are areas that are good at creating and maintaining community, the longevity of those folks tends to be higher. And so health and wellness with people who connect consistently in real life and talk about or go discover cool things in nature, I think it's creating health and wellness in our community. As you were speaking, you know, I was thinking how interesting it is to just discover, and that sense of wonder that you have, this unquenchable sense of wonder, right? And this is science. Science is so interesting because it is the discovery, right? And I don't know. I think of mushroom foraging, and in foraging in general, I grew up rural Nevada, hunting, fishing, foraging. Like, we were just out in nature constantly. We were like
northwest
central, so 5 hours from the nearest Walmart. So very, very remote. And so I noticed in nature, I learned the language of nature. And that is not necessarily, I guess it is science, but science in as much as it's observation and just kind of intuiting your way through things. I could tell you on a mountain where the deer will be, where the elk will be, where the turkey will be. I just learned it from the time I was little, and I know that as though it's second nature. And I didn't do the science and the research space, but what's really cool about what you're doing is that you're putting kind of words to those things that we can, like when I'm mushroom hunting, I don't analyze the soil, check the temps, I don't check which fauna flora, but there's all these genetic things that are turning on. And in as much as like our genome is just a whole bunch of 3D printers, right? And what flicks them on or turns them off is, you know, epigenetics, right? And this is this really interesting field, very, very cool. And I noticed while I'm out foraging, like, there are things happening in my brain. There are things happening in my body. And my supercomputer is like, this is not the spot. And I can't tell you exactly why. You're discovering exactly why.
Your subconscious starts to recognize and identify environmental parameter combinations.
Yes.
Yeah.
And you're putting that to words, which is dope. I don't want to do that. I want to just totally right brain my way through that whole process. And I think that people ask me like, who ever discovered the first poisonous fungus or whatever, blah, blah, blah. And I thought, we used to be much more intuitive creatures than we are now.
I would argue that utilizing my left brain strengthen my right brain's ability to recognize areas of high success. Yeah. And even to just subconsciously, like I'll be at home and I'll be like, oh man, we need to go to this spot. And my wife will be like, what? And I'll be like, we're going. Tomorrow.
I just feel
we're
it.
going.
The fungi are calling.
It'll be right. Like when I took Blaine out. My goodness. We just, every couple of feet, there were giant morels.
I heard you guys killed it. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a pretty good day.
Yeah.
Hopefully you get better every year. I've met some very frustrated people who didn't get better every year. And to be frank, I spent my first 2 years without success. And then I started looking at what other people were doing who were succeeding. And one of those things was iNaturalist. Mm-hmm. It's fantastic because you can set your observations to public if you want. I suggest doing that for pretty much everything except for endangered species. And then you can set it to obscured, which is a giant area no one will ever see. It'll be like Salt Lake County, kind of a huge area, right? And then you can also set it to private so no one knows where. They just know that it exists. And I think it shows like the state, right? Mm-hmm. So I have thousands of observations and I help other people to identify theirs. And the reason I like it is it has facial recognition software. And it will scan the anatomical structure. You can take multiple pictures. So you can get the inside, the outside, the gills, the upside, the downside, the background, and it plugs in geophysical location. And then it uses an algorithm to suggest, with a pretty high degree of likelihood in most cases, species, if not genus. And then other people like me will get on and say, oh, actually, it's this species because you found it in this area, right?
For the Morchella, have you come across any, so health and wellness, have you come across any health benefits to eating this species specifically? Before we go into that, I have a book called The Fungal Pharmacy. And they have like a biochemical breakdown of all these different species of fungi, which is super rad.
I would love to see that book. That sounds fun.
Yeah, they talk about the actual biochemicals of these mushrooms and the theoretical implications.
What year was it published?
I don't know, but the theoretical implications of that from a health and wellness standpoint. So I'm nerding out about that because I'm into that. And I think, wow, how awesome is it that these Morchella that I love to eat are having a health benefit to me potentially because of these chemicals that are in them, but not in this species.
Let's talk about that. So let's start with Morels and then we can talk about other fungi. So nutrition and toxicity is a two-sided coin and you can't discuss one without the other. It's one of my very favorite topics, probably the primary focus of all of my research. I study plant nutrition, fungal nutrition, human nutrition. And what's really interesting is that's an unending topic of education as well, because we're constantly discovering new molecules all over the place, new species with new molecules, and trying to figure out what they actually do. But more importantly, what they break down into. Because what you're consuming is not really what you're absorbing. It goes through enzymatic activity and then it changes, right, into something else, a different molecular structure.
Right.
And I think that that's super interesting. Also, there's, like you said, a huge epigenetic variable where we are genetically unique individuals. And one thing that affects you one way may affect me a different way. Mm-hmm. And that's really interesting. And it actually gives you a degree of insight into your own family's health. And so you can say, okay, because my mother and father were gluten intolerant, I have a statistically higher likelihood genetically of being gluten intolerant, which is really a genetic disorder causing you to not be able to make glutease to break down gluten. So therefore it's toxic to you, something that isn't toxic to other people, right? And I think that that's really interesting and probably where medicine is broken. We should all have at birth genetic pre-screening that's maybe protected like a social, but that data prevents a lot of diagnostic medicine costs and time and pain. I hope you would agree. Like, man, it'd be great if we had a rapid PCR machine in every doctor's office and techs to run them, right? Because you have quick results on everything.
So you would think this. You would think this is actually true. But what's interesting is this study of epigenetics, I think, is multifactorial. And while there is a genetic predisposition, it doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to have that gene sequence turn on in that person. And was it...
Because there's transcriptomic variables,
correct.
Nutrition, hydration.
My best example for this is the pharmacogenomics, right? So they were thinking, let's pull this pharmacogenomics on everybody. So they pull this pharmacogenomics with regard to... Most of it is around anti-inflammatory medicines and psych meds. So
that's good.
And they pull all of those for a person's genome.
Yeah.
Will you have a genetic predisposition to tolerate this medicine, not tolerate it, to do well on this one, do well on that one?
Yeah.
And when I was in med school, it was coming out. This is 20 years ago. And I was so excited. I thought, this is going to be great. Like, now we'll have some more direction, right? Instead of just point, shoot, hope that it's in the bell curve.
Well, kind of complicated everything. Right. Because we got epigenetics and transcriptomics like at the same time.
Yeah. So what ended up happening, and why this didn't become the standard of care and still is not the standard of care, is because just because they have a genetic predisposition to metabolize this one in this way doesn't mean it's not a good medicine for them.
Right.
And so while it came up as a red medicine on this printout, not a green medicine, the green medicine ended up not working on them clinically, and the red medicine worked beautifully on that person.
Biology is so many variables. And you can't quantify them all. And we could try, but we're getting closer.
Has so many variables. I would say just because you have this genome sequence, this piece that it predisposes you to the BRCA1, BRCA2, these breast cancer genes, it will turn on in this twin, but in this twin it won't turn on.
Right.
This one got breast cancer.
Should we define those for the audience?
Sure.
Okay, so epigenetics is essentially the study of how your gene expression is influenced by your environment. And essentially that means that you're being exposed to something that causes your DNA to do something.
Whether it's physical, emotional, whatever, we do not know is the answer.
And then transcriptomics is the study of genetic expression and how it changes over time. Because as we develop as humans, for example, our gene expression is variable throughout our life cycle. And so understanding them together really gives us a much more comprehensive picture of what genetics even means. Probably the most complicated topic in science.
Very complicated.
Incredibly. I have mad respect
and very exciting.
Yes.
Very exciting.
So much. It's a frontier discovery. If you want to publish new things, go be a geneticist.
Totally. Yeah. Totally. No, this is really nerdy and I love it.
Yeah. Oh, you were asking about toxicity and nutrition, though.
Yes, go.
Okay, sorry. So morels are actually the most toxic mushroom in Utah that people consume. Interestingly, though, the cooking process decarboxylates or breaks down the acetyl group off of the toxins, making them no longer toxic. Essentially, it breaks them down into simpler components that are not toxic.
So don't eat them raw.
Never eat any kind of mushroom raw. Never, ever. One of my mycology PhD research mentors said that to us all the time, and he would say, all fungi are mycotoxic. And what that means is all plants are phytotoxic. They make compounds that have toxic results when we eat them in varying concentrations based on the compound and the individual, right? And then fungi are the same way. They make all sorts of molecules that have a variety of effects on us based on your epigenetics, your transcript, all of that. And then interestingly, fungal DNA is highly variable, and so you can get a lot of different kinds of phenotypes and genetic expression. They're highly biodiverse compared to humans, which we're not biodiverse at all, by the way. Fungi are quite biodiverse compared to animals.
Explain what you mean by that.
If you were to look at one species and the number of phenotypes in that species...
Phenotypes are the physically presented type of the genome.
Right. So all phenotypes of a species are still... essentially, they're all one species, right? Because they're genetically intercompatible.
But they're physically different.
Right. And so different species can have the same phenotype, which really means that it genetically expresses in a certain way or certain type. if that makes sense.
Got it.
It's also multi-applicable. Like there are multiple definitions of phenotype based on the context and how we're applying it in that conversation. But essentially, we're talking about the morphological differences. And so this may be a phenotype of Morchella americana. When we sent this to the lab, we actually got results on this as Morchella americana, but it doesn't look anything like the Americanas that we harvest, right? And so it's hard to compare this to humans because race doesn't exist in biology. We refer to it as variety or phenotype, right? And so humans don't have very many phenotypes compared to many individual species of fungi.
That's amazing.
Animals are like the least biodiverse of any of the kingdoms. And then it's like plants, fungi, bacteria. Bacteria are insanely biodiverse and actually defy the species concept and do not need sexual reproduction in any way and don't need to be genetically compatible because they can just absorb and insert DNA. It's fascinating.
Yeah.
All right, so back to fungi. So there's a huge fungal ecological interaction component to fungi. And so I hope people study the fungal bacterial interactions in the future because there's not too many publications on it. But yes, all mushrooms are toxic. Cook them. Always cook them. And some are actually toxic after you cook them too. So do your homework. Try to be 1,000% sure. Use iNaturalist and then post your images of the different parts of the anatomy. Nice, clear, well-lit images for other people to say, actually, it's this species.
The different parts of the anatomy being stalk, cap, underside of the cap, or if they don't have an underside, gills or whatever.
Exactly.
And then anything else anatomy-wise?
So, yeah.
Maybe a cross-section, spore print.
If you wanted to be really thorough, you would pull it out of the ground, including what's under the ground, and take a picture of everything, cut it in half, take a picture of that, make sure you get the top and the bottom, and then also photographically document the habitat you found it in. If you do those things and they're well-lit images and good resolution, you'll have a pretty accurate
people will be able to help
identification almost every time. Once again, molecular genetics is the only 100% way to know what you're actually dealing with because there's a lot of morphological overlap between different species in fungi. Okay.
But I don't have to be 100% sure on a black morel.
Morels are easy. There's nothing that looks like morels except for stinkhorns, gyrometras and verpas. But if you look closely enough, you can differentiate them for sure. And that's actually what I'm trying to write for my anatomy book is essentially the Morchella's genus's anatomical terminology and illustrations. It's going to take me probably another decade to finish that. But
that's amazing. Yeah, that'll be cool.
But it's been fun. It's been really great. We've had a lot of citizen scientists support. Academically, I've had a tremendous amount of support and multiple research mentors over the years that enabled me to focus on quite a few different projects. We're essentially summarizing the publications for our Morel mushroom research into 4 publications. We're in the process of very, very lengthy process of doing all the biostatistical analysis and hydrostatistical analysis. And, probably other types that we haven't even realized we need to do yet. And so we're working on that.
That's super cool. That's really cool. What got me interested in fungi many years ago in my undergrad, I was pre-med and I did this biology class, and the professor at UNLV that was teaching it was like bio 191, like his like basic bio stuff. He was a mycologist. This was his background.
They're pretty rare.
And so the things that he would share, and his name was Dr. Stark. I'll never forget this guy. He would always share like, okay, here's blah, blah, blah. And then he would pull in fungi to it. And he would teach us like, and this is
that
why.
Sounds like a mycologist.
It was super cool. And I was like, wow, fungus are
bacteria.
Everywhere.
People are that way too. Everything's about bacteria to them.
Totally. But it was super, super cool. Toxicity, health benefits.
So there are some publications on this. It varies with species and location. Fungi are highly bioaccumulative. That means that based on where and how they grew, their nutritional composition can vary drastically. Also, the way they express their genes can cause it to vary a lot as well. So I'll give a clinical example. In medical clinical trials on cultivation and consumption. I'm sorry, I'll have to plug the citation later, but there's an 11-fold variation in psilocybin concentration in Psilocybe cubensis in the same batch. So you could have a tote with 100 mushrooms and pick out 2 random mushrooms, and one could be 11 times stronger than the other one.
Whoa.
So that's the variation in genetic expression I'm talking about. They're highly variable, and they're kind of gangsters because they just do what they want.
The time of year, where it was, what are the variables?
We don't fully understand.
Wow.
So we think, mechanically, there must be an epigenetic component to it, right? But then mutation is random.
Wow.
Right? They're also phenoplastic.
That's the phenotypic diversity you're talking about.
Yeah.
Wow.
So their genetic structure is completely different from ours, and their ability to express DNA works differently than ours. And so they're kind of gangsters because fungi do what they want, and they see these obstacles in life, and they're like, yeah, well, I'm just going to do my own thing. So wood is the best example. The reason we have huge deposits of hydrocarbon oils across the planet is because there was about 300 million years between where wood started falling on the ground and depositing, and then later when lignifying fungi that could actually break down that wood evolved. So that all turned into hydrocarbons. And now oil won't form anymore because of the presence of lignifying fungi. But are yeah, crazy.
I didn't know that.
Most people don't. So oil production's over unless we do it synthetically or like in space or controlled fat. But even that would take way too long. Don't try to do that.
Forget about it.
No, forget oil. Careful what you say. So it's really cool because that's one of the most transformative effects for soil transformation is lignifying fungi. They take this super strong structural lignin material and they break it down. Lignin's very stable for an organic molecule, and there are very few things that can make an enzyme to break it down, ligniase. And so fungi mutated and adapted the specialization to be able to do that, and that's where we got mushrooms.
Wow.
So really before then, we didn't have mushrooms. There were they co-evolved.
Huh.
Interestingly. Huh?
That's super interesting.
Plants depositing wood in the soil cause mushrooms to evolve.
This is the next question.
No. No. If you look at the genetic history of all life on Earth,
that hypothesize this, right?
That's because they don't understand DNA. Yeah. It's not even a hypothesis because literature strongly contradicts that. We have more evidence for evolutionary history than anything else.
Right.
More publications and more hardcore evidence. And molecular genetic analysis done properly is essentially unquestionable compared to other analytical techniques. So molecular data is kind of king. And really what it shows is that I'm so glad you asked that. All right. 1969 is when it essentially became a kingdom. Before then, we thought that they were plants. Okay.
They're more like animals, right? Cellular respiration?
Right.
Yeah.
Well, I'll elaborate on that. But the animal and fungal kingdom diverged from a common ancestor more recently than any other of the kingdoms. So we're more closely related to fungi and vice versa than either are to any other kingdom. And if you look at the differences, you'll see the similarities, okay? They don't internally digest. They externally digest. They grow into and around and enzymatically digest their food, okay? They sexually reproduce through spores, right? And asexual reproduction as well. They are heterotrophic, and that means that they can adapt really, really quickly to different gases and different compositions in their environment. So heterotrophicity for respiration means that there are fungi that thrive in the presence of oxygen, and then they can still get by in the absence of oxygen, whereas many other things would die, right? So they're multiple trophicity of respiration.
Wow.
And fantastic facultative anaerobes. And that's what I'm saying. They're adaptable. They're the gangsters of biology because they're like, yeah, oxygen's cool, but, I can still survive. Whatever.
It's amazing.
It's awesome, right?
Amazing.
Oxygen is just more energetic, but not all fungi are dependent on it. A lot of fungi, mushrooms are a very statistically insignificant portion of the fungal kingdom. Most fungi are microbial and you can't see them.
Right.
Right. So what we think of as fungi is really just the expression of two of the kingdoms, two of the families in the fungal kingdom, Ascomycetes and Basidiomycetes. Most of them are Basidiomycetes. Morels are Ascomycetes, so they're not true mushrooms. Yeah.
We have some fungal infections in medicine that occur. Coccidioidomycosis and things like this in the Midwest.
The books are very expensive. Yeah, I've seen them. Cool images, though. And they're essential to be able to diagnostically identify what that is, right? But as we discussed, that's hugely limited.
Yeah.
Isn't it? So I would argue that in that case, although it may be useful and less expensive, it's way less accurate than doing molecular genetic analysis. Because you can extract, amplify, and suspend and analyze that DNA in like an hour if you have the equipment and experience. And a lot of these new bio kids that are graduating right now, that are pre-med, they go through training on PCR. So hopefully we see that in the future of medicine, because I would argue it's the biggest part that's missing.
For sure. This is a perfect time for a mushroom joke.
Okay.
Do you have a favorite?
Oh, man. You know, they grow on you. And literally. So Candida speciosa, right? Thrush, I'm sure you're familiar.
Yep.
Actually is like 98% of your dermal microbiome. So the fungal species that is most dominant on your skin and throughout your entire digestive tract is one species. And it really is a biofilm. It's a physiological,
super normal. It's normal.
Biological barrier that protects you from the infestation of other organisms.
Yeah.
Really cool. So
cool.
One of our most powerful symbiotic bonds as human beings is with a specific fungal species. But really, it's just hoarding you so that when you die, it can eat you.
Yeah.
Hark you. Because it flares up when your immune system crashes, you know?
Tyler, I don't know if I would call that a joke. That was like morbidly funny in kind of a weird way.
You put me on the spot.
No problem. Do you know how much space a fungi needs to grow?
It's totally variable.
No, it's a joke. This is my joke.
No. How much?
As mushroom as possible.
That's a good one.
Yeah, it's a dad joke / mushroom joke. Yeah.
Remember, while you're hunting mushrooms, something might be hunting you.
Yeah. So, thanks for that creeping me out about Candida. And but it's also very beautiful. It's protective, beautiful. And then it's like, hey,
I'm cool with it eating me if it keeps me safe while I'm alive. That's
totally
it's cool with me. Yeah.
Well, this is super fun. What I have gleaned is from a physiologic standpoint, the health benefits of different species of mushroom is still out there. The fungal pharmacology book is fascinating. You'll love this book.
I have to see that. You got to show me.
Yeah, I'll show you. I've got it at my house. I think that for me, it's more they're yummy, and I love mushroom flavor, especially the wild ones.
Very interesting.
So different than anything else.
Highly variable, huh?
Highly variable, and
the shrimp russula.
Yes.
You tried it?
Yeah, shrimpy goodness.
It tastes shrimpy. When I tell people that, they're like, no way. And I'm like, and it's pink.
Try this. Try this. But my favorite part, health and wellness wise, to foraging and mushrooms is really kind of the spiritual journey, the emotional intelligence journey that it brings to my life, to other people's lives, where not only the sense of community and doing like the forays that you talked about and going out with a friend or something, but also just grounding, like spiritually and breathing. And Shinrin-yoku, the art of forest bathing, the Japanese folks talk about, like just that art is so health and wellness centric.
You recognize this smell? It's exactly what you're talking about.
Oh, that's beautiful. So Tyler's opened up a bag of soil.
Okay.
Goodness.
So before I tell you what it is, the molecule you're smelling is called geosmin. It's an aromatic molecule, and according to publications, it has a therapeutic effect that can even mitigate addictive tendencies. And it has the ability to...
Where is this located?
So that is primarily from actinobacteria and cyanobacteria in healthy soils. And so that's the smell of healthy soil. When you go out into the forest, into nature, you definitely, even subconsciously, you recognize that smell.
For sure.
If you're a nature person anyways.
Oh, yeah. That's one of the smells that I love.
Well, this is the smell that is associated with healthy soil, and human beings co-evolved with actinobacteria because we recognize it as a marker to indicate an environment with nutrition. Healthy soil has food.
It smells a certain way.
So it actually induces a calming, relaxing effect. It can, according to literature, release serotonin and dopamine. It makes you happy.
Okay,
when
tell
you
me the
put
name
your
of
hands
it.
in
Tell me
soil.
the name of it again.
All right, this is the Vermicompost that I produce in my business.
Okay.
And that I've produced for many, many different businesses. We use it to make a variety of different products, from compost teas to soil mixtures, but we use it to heal soil, like the farm of one of my clients that made these products. I'm just going to throw up real quick from Gianna. She's down at Big Ear Buds Farmers in Blanding, Utah, and makes the best medical organic hemp in Utah, and does so by using high quality organic material that they compost to transform their land and give plants what they need, because you aren't what you eat. You are what you eat, right?
Eat.
Yes. The Surgeon General recently said that most diseases are linked directly to a depletion of soil nutritional concentration.
Yep.
So really, you were asking about nutrition. It varies with location and species, but fungi are really good at bioaccumulating minerals. And many of those minerals are in a form that's bioavailable to humans because of the habitats that they're in.
Tell me the name of the smell that I'm smelling.
Geosmin.
Geosmin?
Is the name of the molecule.
And what creates that smell?
Actinobacteria and cyanobacteria. And it's an aromatic molecule that you can smell. It's essentially a waste product for them. It's a respiratory gas that comes out.
Geosmin.
Geosmin.
The reason why I wanted to know that again was because really cool. My wife this weekend asked me, why do you spend so much time in the mountains?
That's why. You're addicted from that smell. Look at the literature. It's going to blow your mind.
Well, I think that we are, if you look at like our average person out there, we're all addicted, right? We have these supercomputers in our hands. We're all struggling with dopamine.
We like things that make us feel good.
We're struggling in those spaces.
Yeah.
So getting up there, smelling the geosmin, like bonding and there's a calming, relaxing, really cathartic space there. That's wonderful.
Yeah.
So now I can be very specific with her.
That might be why. And I'm interested to hear your feedback after you look at literature, because you're better at interpreting medical literature than I will be. Oh, and by the way, big thanks for this gift. Dr. Sanders gave me this awesome mushroom statue. I'll put it on my table at
it's patterned after a Morel mushroom. It looks
Thank
just
you
like
so
the
much.
Here you can kind of see the same like Morel flavor there.
Yeah, they're delicious.
That's mountain mahogany right there.
Oh, thank you so much. Yeah. They are very similar in the structure. I love this. Really appreciate you. And on the medical side of things, so it has to do with toxicity and bioavailability. In this cup, I actually have a product I formulated, and it's focused on complete nutrition and essentially having every single thing that the human body needs in one. Like, you could survive off of this one thing. Oh, cool. I've gained 10 pounds a month the last 3 months on this. I lost a bunch of weight from dental work, and I had to eat like liquids for a month. It totally sucked. So I had to weight gain back, and I've gained a bunch of healthy weight. Nice. 10 a month isn't bad for mostly muscle.
It sounds like we need to nerd out about a bunch of other things too.
Well, we don't know a lot of the answers to what you were getting at. For example, lion's mane, one of the coolest. There are publications showing that there's potential toxic effects in certain varieties, certain growth methods, in certain individuals. They're bioaccumulative, not just nutrients, but toxic heavy metals as well. So what you grow them in is really, really important.
Super cool.
Yeah.
Can you speak to your business, Dr. Gaia?
Yeah. So I started as an agriculture consultant about 12 years ago, mostly with cannabis, tomato, and herb farmers. And I went back to school and finished my botany degree, and then started a corporation with multiple people, and I became CEO. And now I provide consultation services, and I make a variety of products from our vermicompost that I mix into 4 different soil types. So we have sod and seedgrass transplant soil, tree transplant soil, garden soil. We're tinkering around with stuff like cacti soil and stuff like that. But we make compost tea, and we sell it at Moonlight Gardens, our retail partner. You can check us out at dr-gaia.com, or if I can hold it still enough, we'll plug it in below. Scan the QR code. Check it out. That's our design. But our compost tea has had raving reviews from everyone who's tried it. It will transform your yard, and we use only local Utah microbes.
You're saying compost tea?
Yes, so I
But
can use
don't make
this.
tea out of this.
I can. It's very universally adaptable. I use this to make 4 soil mixtures. We use it as a top feed and to make compost tea.
Okay.
It's very universally applicable for grass, veggies, trees, everything. This is what plants want because it's high in humic acid and bioavailable nutrients and probiotic microbes. You know that candida we were talking about? So I can actually select for symbiotic organisms in the culture process and kill the pathogens with the presence of oxygen. Oxygen kills most plant pathogens because they're not tolerant to it. And so this is full of symbiotic microbes.
Huh. Cool.
It's a probiotic, prebiotic, complete nutrition for plants.
Wow.
Yeah.
But not for human consumption.
No.
Just to make clear on the tea thing.
Tea is because we put it into this mesh bag where it brews for 12 to 48 hours.
Okay.
And you should go get some kombucha. And this is for your garden, to treat your garden. This is enough to actually do your front and backyard for a whole year.
Wow.
It's highly concentrated. You only need a small amount per batch. You can do it every week.
Rad.
We're applying treatments at people's yards, setting up at farmers markets and things like that. But we'll have a table at the Fungi Festival and the Fall Parade. You guys should come check it out. Get some tickets while they last. I hope to see you there.
Tyler, this has been so fun. Thank you for just nerding out
Thank you,
with me
John.
for an hour.
Yeah.
This is so cool. We need to do this again and talk more shop.
We have a
about
lot
lots
more
of
to
different
talk
things.
about.
We didn't
Yeah.
even touch on some of the psilocybin space and some of this other spaces.
We
that
could
are
talk
really
about
cool.
that for multiple episodes.
Totally.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'll be doing a psilocybin forum at the Georgia Festival, and part of it will be streamed, if not the whole thing. So I'll send you the link for that.
Cool.
And there will be psilocybin topics at the Fungi Festival. But my topic, you're going to love it. It's industrial and medical mycological technologies. So there's a huge medical focus.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's really cool. That's really cool. Well, let's stay in touch. Let's keep nerding out. And
Heck yeah.
Thank you for your contributions to science, to our communities, to building community, a wonderful community.
I appreciate you for this opportunity to do the same.
Yeah, thanks, guys. I hope you all learned something cool from today's podcast. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Dr. John here with Tyler Hacking. Thank you.
Thank you.